Also leads to sometimes a lot of activity that can be very dangerous, recovery activity, and people who become very excited about it. So please be more careful about reporting this information. There's no reason to run with it until it's actually verified by the police or by the FBI. Same thing was true about the alleged arrest last night and information about box cutters and knives, and none of which was verified by the police or the FBI, all of which was publicized, all of which turns out now to be untrue. So if we could all be a little bit more patient and verify the information before we put it out, we won't raise people's hopes unnecessarily, and we won't create a situation in which decisions are made that can endanger lives. School is open today, and it opened on time. It'll be open. They will be open again on Monday, except in the area that is still closed off, which is the area south of Canal Street, and that part of the city is still part of the recovery zone. We're going to try today to carve out another area south of Canal Street that we can open over the weekend, and particularly to have it open for Monday. And it would be the Wall Street area. And therefore, we would ask businesses there to start considering the fact that over the weekend, they may want to come in and clean out and make sure that their buildings are able to operate on Monday. I'll know better at 4 or 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock whenever we get back to briefing you how much of the Wall Street area we can reopen. But we're going to try very hard to open up as much of it as possible for Monday. The Staten Island Ferry will also start operating definitely on Monday, and we'll try to start these things over the weekend so that there's a shakedown before we actually get to Monday. Businesses that need help, there are a lot of them. They should know that the resources of the city, the state, and the federal government are all there to assist them and to help them to reestablish themselves so that not only they can recover what they lost, but so they can grow and prosper. We ordinarily have lots of incentive packages and other programs that the state and the city do together to keep businesses in New York and to encourage businesses to come to New York. All of those packages are now going to be assisted by the legislation that was passed in Albany yesterday, and the legislation that apparently is going to pass in Washington that will make substantial amounts of money available to the city and state for exactly this purpose. So we're trying to reach out to all of the businesses that are affected. We've put together the city and state economic development operations to do that. And what we will do is give you a number later so that they can also call us. If we don't get to you, we will try. You get to us, and we will work with you on figuring out what you need in order to get through this difficult period and then reestablish and grow. We've taken out 10,425 tons of debris, 1,154 truckloads so far, and that's really to give you some sense of the monumental nature of the task that's going on. The people who are doing it are incredibly brave. The reports yesterday of firefighters and others that were saved and taken to hospitals were also false. They were not firefighters and people who had been buried in the attack. They were people who got injured or hurt or got into some difficulties during the recovery effort yesterday. So it is very good news that they were saved, and it's wonderful. However, we also have to be careful about reporting that. And we also have to underscore how dangerous it is for what these men and women are doing. Finally, a couple of warnings. There's a telemarketing firm that is calling people up asking for donations. If somebody calls you and asks for a donation to help the surviving families or the heroes or anything like that, call up the police or the FBI and tell us who's calling you, because we'll go out and arrest them. Nobody should be calling up and asking for donations. There are people that are offering donations, and that's wonderful. But there's nobody that I know of or that the governor or anyone else that has been authorized by anyone to be calling up and soliciting donations from people. If anybody is doing that, and there is one telemarketing group that is doing this particularly from senior citizens, we would really like to catch them and make an example out of them, in the same way that we would like to catch some of the people that are calling in bomb threats. This is a difficult time. It's a time in which people are more susceptible, more vulnerable than usual. And there are always, unfortunately, people trying to take advantage of that. But if we catch you, then we're going to try very hard to put you in jail. On that note, Governor. All right.
Mayor, thank you. First, let me say that we're grateful the President is coming in this afternoon, and as we indicated yesterday, I think it's an important message and sign of his commitment to the ongoing effort to make sure that the people of America stand with the people of New York as we get through this, and we're extremely grateful to him for that. We've thanked so many people. The police and firefighters have been so brave, the EMS groups, and but I want to particularly thank one particular group right now that are still out there working. The Port Authority had its headquarters in the World Trade Center. It's been through devastating losses. Many of its top administrators are lost. Dozens of its police officers are lost. And yet right now, out at the airports, out at the bridges in downtown Manhattan, we have hundreds and hundreds of Port Authority workers, thousands of workers, out there standing shoulder to shoulder with everyone else, helping others instead of bearing their own grief. And I just wanted to thank them for their professionalism and the great job they are doing. I also want to thank our command center bunker up in Albany. I don't know if they're watching right now, but they were activated by 9:30 Tuesday morning, and they've been there ever since, many of them going 18, 20 hours a day, helping to coordinate the effort with the city so that we could make sure whatever needs the city had, we would be able to respond to as quickly as possible, and I want to thank them. The mayor talked about the economic and the financial compact considerations that are underway right now, and just about 2 hours ago I talked with Chairman Bill Young of the Appropriations Committee. I've talked with Senator Clinton, Senator Schumer, and our House delegates, and we're very grateful to them because it does look like this morning legislation will pass Congress authorizing significant and important financial help to the city of New York, to the tri-state area, and to to all of those who are going through this difficulty. And I just wanted to thank Senator Schumer, who I was on the phone with all night, and Senator Clinton. And in the House delegation, the whole delegation, but in particular, about 1 o'clock this morning, there was a meeting going on trying to decide what to do. And Congressman John Sweeney, Congressman Jim Walsh, both of whom are from upstate, were in that meeting with the Speaker fighting very hard, and along with Senator Schumer, they deserve a great deal of credit for making this appropriation possible to help us get through this. As the mayor indicated, we are working as well on economic recovery. As I said yesterday, we set up an economic recovery assistance headquarters at 633 3rd Avenue. This is a joint state and city effort with the federal SBA and other federal agencies there as well, where a business seeking assistance can get in one's place, state, city, federal help to make sure that they can get back on their feet. And the entire 32nd floor has been allocated for this purpose, and there is a number operational, 212-818-1700. For businesses that want the help in getting back on their feet. Finally, with respect to the contributions, we've been inundated with contributions from people across the state, and we are very, very grateful. It is just incredible to see this outpouring of public support for the families and for all of those who are going through this difficult recovery. The city has the Twin Towers Fund, the United Way has its September 11th fund, and the state has set up a fund, the World Trade Center Relief Fund, to take in all those contributions that have been made from across the state. And as the mayor indicated, We are unaware of any legitimate group that is soliciting funds, but obviously donations are accepted, and we have a 1-800 number for those who want to donate, but it's probably going to be inundated, but I'll give it anyway. 1-800-801-8092, or checks can be sent to P.O. Box 5028, Albany, New York. And these funds will be working with the Twin Towers Fund and with the United Way to make sure we coordinate our efforts to make sure that everything that can be done is done for the victims of this tragic incident. So we'll get through this. And again, to the Mayor, to the President, we're grateful that everyone is pulling together to make sure we put this behind us. Thank you.
Good morning. Again, I'm Barry Moore. I'm the Assistant Director of the FBI here in New York. Following on the Mayor's comments, what I would like to just reiterate is, again, the whole investigative effort of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is the FBI and NYPD and a number of other federal agencies, is to identify the hijackers, their support systems, where they were since they've been in country. And in that regard, we are doing numerous interviews, running down hundreds, or if not thousands, of leads around the country. We are responding to numerous calls from the airports to reiterate what the Mayor has already told you. The reporting that has been going on all night, I can definitively tell you, is inaccurate. We were out at both airports last evening. We did talk to approximately a dozen individuals. We have only one individual left who is still being questioned.
Folks, we're going to break into this press conference by the Mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, because we've got some breaking news. Leon Harris here at the CNN Center Atlanta, but we're going now to Washington, D.C., where our Kelly Reed is standing by. She has got some breaking news on the identities of those 18 hijackers. Kelly, take it away.
Well, Leon, CNN did manage to grab a list of names of the 18 suspected hijackers that is supposed to be officially released by Justice sometime later today. I will do my best to read the names. Some are a bit unfamiliar. On American Flight 11, first name Walid al-Shehri. The second, Wael al-Shehri, also known as Walid al-Shehri. Now, we do know a little bit about him. He held a U.S. and Saudi Arabian driver's license. He had his passport from the United Arab Emirates. His latest residences include Daytona Beach, Florida, and not too far from here in Washington, Vienna, Virginia. And he also attended a U.S. flight school in Florida, Embry-Riddle. Third name, Mohammed Atta. We also have information on him. He held U.S. and Egyptian driver's license, his passport also from the United Arab Emirates. He was also an attendant at U.S. flight schools, Huffman Aviation in Venice, Florida, and Sim Center in Opa-locka. And he rented a car that was later found at Boston's Logan Airport. Abdul Al-Omari and Satam Sugami. Marwan al-Shehi also on the list. He as well, they're looking an awful lot alike here, Leon. Marwan al-Shehi, a United UAE passport. Fayez Ahmed Mohald al-Sherhi. Hamza al-Ghamdi, Amdad al-Ghamdi. Let me stop here for a moment. We have a few more names to read. The way this is working out is there were 5 hijackers on 2 planes, 4 hijackers on 2 other. We are told by law enforcement sources that most of these names in some way connect in some way to indirectly or directly to Osama bin Laden. Continuing on, United Airlines flight number 93, Ahmad al-Haznawi, Ahmed al-Nami, Ziad Jarrad, and Saeed al-Ghamdi. American Airlines flight number 77, Khalid al-Midar, Majed Mokhed, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and Salem al-Hazmi. So similar last names here. Perhaps they were brothers. We were told by investigators that they were looking for relatives, brothers, as somehow interconnected. Now, of course, all these people presumed dead. They were on those flights. They were the hijackers. The real focus of this investigation, Leon, now is using these names and jumping forward. Let's figure out the network. The FBI is trying to figure out the network involved here. What other associates, what other terrorist cells there may be in the United States that are at work. We also know that there were terrorist cells identified in Hamburg, Germany. That there are investigations going on there. So this is a good starting point. Again, this list not officially released yet by the Justice Department. We obtained this list of names through sources. Leon?
Well, it may not be officially released by the Justice Department, but it's about to be officially released by CNN. As I'm just now learning from our producers that this entire list is going to be available on CNN.com. So folks out there in the audience, if you would like to see the names that are on this list, the 18 names that officials are now, or will be officially saying at some point this morning or sometime today, are the suspects that they expect, that they believe were on the planes themselves and died in the crashes. Those names will be available on CNN.com. Kelly, before we let you go, is there any other information being released aside from the names? Is there any information, for instance, about where they have been, where they came from, if they have been residing here in the U.S. before this incident? Any other information like that?
Well, besides the information that we gave you, we do know that many of them have trained and were licensed pilots, trained at U.S. flight schools and were licensed pilots. And we do know that many of them either resided together at various locations here in the U.S., many in Florida. I said one here in Virginia. But we do have some more on the ongoing investigation, Leon, if you're curious. We did tell you last night that we had several people that were arrested at New York airports at both JFK and LaGuardia. Well, we are told now that after intense questioning by FBI members of the Joint Terrorism Task Force that all but one of those people has been released. We also know that in Miami's airport, sources say that law enforcement detained several people there. One woman was seen walking into the airport in civilian clothing, went into the restroom, came out in a flight attendant uniform. She was with a man who also had a flight attendant uniform. When they were approached by authorities, they ran, but they were captured and they are now being questioned. And we also know that the U.S. Coast Guard has boarded a Carnival Cruise Line ship off the coast of Miami earlier today. They detained two people who authorities describe as having a history of hijacking. According to law enforcement sources, that ship was boarded at 3 a.m. after the passenger list was checked by authorities. So this manhunt continues, Leon, around the country.
And let me ask you one final question, if I may. You said, going back to the case in New York, you said it was 10 or 11 that had been detained originally, and only one now is still being detained?
Well, our sources last night had said at least 8 people had been detained, and that number has gone back and forth. But they were questioned. They have been released, except for one.
But the question is that one believed to be in any way linked to the incidents that happened Tuesday?
It's very early to tell, Leon, in this investigation. Sometimes there's a suspected link, but many times it proves to be nothing. And I think that law enforcement has yet to determine that for themselves. Okay, well, thank you very much. Kelly Arena, thank you very much for getting that list to us. Darren, over to you.
We want to get more on this list, and if you're just joining us, we're talking about a list of 18 people that authorities believe were involved, were on board those planes that were hijacked and crashed on Tuesday. Our Mike Betcher is with us here in Atlanta. He's also working on the list, and as Leon was alluding to, Mike, I would imagine beyond the list of names and what small connections are able to make to these planes, like rental cars and plane tickets, authorities are going to want to know a lot more, as in their activities that were leading up to their getting on those planes on Tuesday.
Well, absolutely, and they want to know a lot more about what groups these people belong to. In the intelligence agencies in this country, they have lists of people who they believe belong to certain groups. And I am told by intelligence sources that they believe that the lead groups in this incident, in this terrorist attack in New York and Washington, the lead group, they're looking very closely at Egyptian Islamic Jihad and other North African groups. They haven't completely made that link, but they're looking very, very closely at this. They'll be checking this, cross-referencing these names against names known to be members of these various groups. The chief person in Egyptian Islamic Jihad, Mr. Zarari, is a top lieutenant of Osama bin Laden. He appeared with him in a photograph more than a year ago at a meeting in Afghanistan. This group has been linked to other terrorist attacks around the world in association with the Al-Qaeda group. And always remember, Al-Qaeda itself is not an organized group organized to carry out terrorist attacks. It's primarily an umbrella group. What they do is bring in other groups in other parts of the world. They sit as sort of the corporate board, and they have these smaller companies that actually go out there and do their work, these smaller companies being terrorist groups like Egyptian Islamic Jihad. Also, we know that bin Laden, over the last couple of years, or more than that, has been really reaching out to Algerian terrorist groups. He's used them in a number of attacks against the United States. They will be checking that list for those names as well. Now, something to be careful with in this list is the fact that some of these people are listed to have certain passports. For example, Mohammed Atta is known to have carried a United Arab Emirates passport, but they're looking closely that he may not be a UAE citizen, that he may be from Egypt or some other North African country. They'll be looking at those things as well. People are racing to go through this list and make sense of it and really try to get to the bottom of the identities of these people.
Mike, what about what would be perhaps the next list? If these were 18 people who were on board those planes, they couldn't have carried out this operation by themselves. They had to have supporters, they had to have handlers. Do authorities believe that those people would still be in this country?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And there is yet a second list out there that has been distributed around the country to airlines and airports that has people that they suspect might be people who've provided support to these 18. Now, when a person books a ticket, for example, or travels in some other means or is stopped by police, they will be cross-checked against this list to see if they're on it. Now, some people on that list have already been cleared, but there are many others who have not been found, and they're out looking for them now.
All right, Mike Boettcher, thank you so much. I'm sure we're going to be learning a lot more as the morning goes on, so we'll be checking back with you. Also, a reminder for our viewers, the entire list of the 18 suspects can be found on our website at CNN.com, so just go ahead and log in there and you can check it out for yourself.
Well, I just did. I just logged in and I just checked it out, and I want to advise folks that when you do go there, you're going to find that you'll see all of the names grouped with the flights that investigators think that each of the hijackers were on. That is American Airlines flights 11 and 77 and United Airlines flights 175 and 93. So they're all grouped together there on CNN.com, so make sure you go there and check it out. Let's go now to Washington. CNN's Eileen O'Connor standing by there. Eileen?
Well, Leon, I have a lot of details that we've gleaned from document checks and cross-checks of documents over the last few days as we've been getting information from law enforcement sources up and down the East Coast of the United States and all over the United States. First of all, let us start with Mohammed Atta. This is a man who many of these men are linked through. Mohammed Atta is listed on American Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles. American 11 was the first plane to hit the World Trade Center. He rented a car that was later found at Logan Airport. That is what put authorities onto him. He held U.S. and Egyptian driver's license. He had a passport that was the United Arab Emirates, but we are being told by officials in that government that he is not a citizen of that country. Law enforcement sources tell me that they are operating under the assumption that these UAE passports may well be false. There apparently is a big problem with that identification being false. His latest residence was in Coral Springs, Florida, and in Hamburg, Germany. And he attended flight schools at Huffman Aviation in Venice, Florida, Sim Center in Opa-locka, Florida. We were there yesterday. He also, according to sources, attended another flight school in Palm Beach and possibly an additional flight school to get some refresher courses very recently. Now, he is also linked to a man, two brothers, Waleed al-Shehri and Marwan al-Shehri. Now, these are both men who would appear to be Saudi by their last name. This is a Saudi name that, in fact, is from a tribe that fought in Afghanistan in the 80s and 90s, which could bring you to a link to Osama bin Laden. Now, also, as you know, Osama bin Laden is originally of Saudi nationality. So this is where you're seeing the evidence that the United States government is saying they have linking this to Osama bin Laden. Now, the al-Sharis, we know from German authorities that Marwan al-Shari lived in Germany, in Hamburg, with Mohammed Atta. As I said, Mohammed Atta was listed on Flight 11, Boston to Los Angeles. But Marwan was listed on United 175. That was Boston to Los Angeles. That plane was the one that hit the second World Trade Center tower. Marwan attended those same flight schools along with Mohammed Atta. And as you know, his cousin, Waleed, was also associated with these two men. He attended a flight school, Embry-Riddle University in Daytona Beach, another flight school. He was on board Flight 11 with Mohammed Atta. So we now know that the pilots, the probable pilots of those two planes out of Boston all had extensive flight training in schools in Florida that the authorities have been working on. These are the alleged pilots. We don't know how many pilots might have been aboard the plane. All of these men listed here could have had the ability to fly those planes. Now, these men are also linked to some of the men on the list. For instance, another man named Al-Omari, who is on the list, Abuhim Al-Omari. He was linked to a flight school in Vero Beach. Police had gone to that flight school. It's called Flight Safety International. Neighbors have said that this man was at Flight Safety International. But a next-door neighbor of his, taken into custody for questioning, we know through his lawyer, has told the FBI that Al-Omari is actually safe in Saudi Arabia and should be presenting himself to U.S. officials in that country. We were told he would be presenting himself yesterday. And they are claiming, those associates of Al-Omari who are in custody, one associate of Al-Omari, is claiming that all of this associating to them is a case of mistaken identity. So we must tell viewers that while there are names on this list, it could be that they are perhaps stolen identity. Leon?
All right, Eileen O'Connor, thank you very much. Just beginning the process of gleaning through this information that's just now becoming available to us. Eileen O'Connor in Washington. Darren?
We're going to get some help in understanding the information on this list that we're getting so far. We're going to bring in Peter Bergen. He is a terrorism expert, also a CNN consultant. Peter, good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning.
Have you had a chance to look at this list yourself?
Quick review of this list with somebody familiar with certain Middle Eastern names, and particularly Saudi names, reveals that about half of the people on this list have distinctive Saudi tribal names. A lot of them are from the southwest area of Saudi Arabia, abutting Yemen. As you undoubtedly know, bin Laden is not only a Saudi citizen, but his family originated in Yemen. A lot of Yemenis moved from Yemen to Saudi Arabia in the past century. So you're seeing that probably about half the people on this list are Saudi. You're seeing a couple of Yemenis. And then a further thing which I think is important, a source familiar with the bin Laden organization told me just recently, in fact a few weeks ago, that bin Laden veterans returning to Saudi Arabia from Afghanistan have been talking about some big action that was planned in coming weeks. Now, at the time, my source felt that it might be in Saudi Arabia. Now it appears, of course, that it was in the United States. Darren.
Also, that also brings the question, if people were hearing that weeks ago, why wouldn't U.S. intelligence sources pick up on that as well?
Well, U.S. intelligence sources did sort of pick up on it, but like every human being, we always tend to see things through the prism of the last event that happened. And there were warnings in Saudi Arabia. For instance, July 18th, the State Department released a warning of imminent and specific threats against U.S. targets in Saudi Arabia. There was also a closing of the embassy in Yemen in June. There was also arrests of people in New Delhi. So there was attention in the Middle East, but not in the United States.
I want to follow up on a couple of points that you made here, Peter. First of all, you were pointing out that you think that some of the names on this list are Yemenis. Yemen brings to mind the attack on the USS Cole, and I can't help but make the association between that attack and what's now happened here in the U.S.
Well, indeed, and of course the Cole was an unprecedented attack. The embassy bombings in Africa were also unprecedented. This organization does the unexpected. It's not where the United States thought the attack was going to come. Clearly, as I mentioned, there were indications an attack was in the offing. The United States government was prepared for it in the Middle East, but obviously not here. Darren.
Also, I think we're learning slowly as we follow this story not to just see things in terms of black and white, and one point doesn't necessarily lead to another. This this attack did not come with a return address, is one way that I've heard it said. So that when you look down a list like this and you see what you say are Saudi names or Yemenis names, that does that or does that not necessarily mean a link with those particular countries, or do you have to be careful not to make that association?
Well, I think there are various countries in the world where it's a lot easier to get a false passport from. I'm not very familiar with how easy it is to obtain a Saudi passport, but I would guess it's fairly difficult. So, I mean, some of these passports may be fake, some not, but the point is that the names on these passports are at least Saudi tribal names, which does seem to bring it back again to Osama bin Laden.
And understanding the world of terrorism as you do, looking at this list and what little information is on it so far, what would be the next bit of information that you would like to see to help put this picture together better?
I'd like to find out the two closest friends of each of these people on the list and find out what they have to say.
And where those people might be would be a good question as well, I guess.
Indeed.
Peter Bergen in our Washington Bureau, thank you very much for helping us to understand this list and think of the next questions to ask.
Fascinating. All right, let's get some more information now from our Mike Betcher, who's standing by. Mike?
List one more time. We have a graphic. We'll go over it flight by flight. The first is from American Airlines Flight 11. That was the flight from Boston to L.A. that crashed into the Second World Trade Center tower. Walid al-Shari. Wael al-Shari, a.k.a. Walid al-Shari, number 2 on that list. Mohammed Atta, who has come up prominently. They have a lot of information on him, have been tracking him around the country before he boarded that plane. Abdul Alamari, Satam Sugami. Let's go next to United Flight 179 from Boston to Los Angeles. Excuse me, 175 from Boston to Los Angeles. That crashed into the South Tower. The first one hit in the attack. Marwan al-Shehi, Fayez Ahmad, Mohald al-Sheri, Hamza al-Ghamdi, Ahmed al-Ghamdi. United Airlines Flight 93, Newark to San Francisco. That is the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania in the field. The 4 names there: Ahmed al-Haznawi, Ahmed al-Nami, Ziad Zara, Saeed al-Ghamdi. The last one, 4 names on the list. American Airlines Flight 77 from Dulles to Los Angeles. That is the plane that flew into the Pentagon. Khalid al-Midar, Mahed Moked, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and Salim al-Hazmi. Now, as you heard from talking to Peter Bergen there, U.S. intelligence officials will be checking this list. They have been checking it already because they've had it for quite some time. They have a good idea about a lot of these people. If some of these links go to Yemen and to families there, those family names, then there has already been, I know, confirmed through sources, a lot of look at seeing that this somehow might be connected to the USS Cole attack, that some of the groups involved in that were involved in this current attack against the United States. And I say current because a very high-ranking intelligence source told me that, look, this thing isn't over. We still have to be on guard. It's not over. As well, I want to show you a second list. We won't go through the names on this, but this is a second list that is out there for use by police agencies, airports, airlines. It is a list of 52 people. It's a watch list, and they're looking for people who may be associates of these 18 who U.S. State Department, intelligence, and FBI officials believe died on those aircraft. Now, this list of 52 are possible associates, the infrastructure, so to speak, who may have helped carry this out. We do know, however, that several of the names on that list that's out there have already been cleared. Leon?
All right, Mike Betcher, thank you very much. We'll be getting back to you later on. Mike is going to be covering all these investigative facts for us from the newsroom. Darren, over to you.
Yeah, more to that list in a bit. And again, one more reminder, you can see the list on CNN.com on our website. Meanwhile, we move on to the idea that America is very much in the mode of recovery and also getting ready for some kind of response. And in that effort, there's a huge call-up of military reserves. For more on that, let's bring in our senior White House correspondent, John King, who is at the White House this morning. John, good morning.
Good morning to you, Darren. CNN has learned that the president this morning has authorized the Pentagon to call up as many as 50,000 members of the National Guard and the military reserves. Now, we are told by one senior administration official the ultimate number is likely to be closer to 40,000. The president meeting with his cabinet at this hour, the defense secretary, the secretary of state, among those in that meeting, talking not only about the investigation and not only about potential military responses, but also a beefed up what the military calls, quote, homeland defense. And that is what we are told, at least initially, these reservists will be used for. The Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld saying just yesterday that he needed more reserve pilots to man the fighter jets that are on standby at military bases across the country. There have also been some combat air patrols to protect major commercial flight corridors in the United States. So we are told up to 50,000 reservists and National Guard members authorized by the orders the president will sign today. Again, one senior administration official estimating the number actually called up will be closer to 40,000. This to provide increased security, to help with recovery efforts, and to help man those fighter jets on standby because of the continuing fears of perhaps another terrorist attack. Darren.
John, I normally wouldn't point this out, but in this time, the sirens in the background there, is that just a common sound right now in Washington?
It is a very common sound in Washington right now. They have set up an extraordinarily large security perimeter around the White House. There is traffic gridlock to the north and to the south. Police vehicles going back and forth. Anyone visiting the White House comes in with a motorcade now. Any official visiting the White House has a motorcade with a police escort. So it's a very, very common sound, unfortunately, these days in Washington. And I can actually see the sirens you were just referring to coming through now. It is some sort of a motorcade approaching the White House.
I also want to ask you what's going to take place later this morning, just over an hour from now, at the Washington National Cathedral, as the president gathers with other members of the Washington community and leaders from around the country in remembrance of those who have lost their lives, and a moment of silence for the entire country.
A moment of silence for the entire country. The message from the White House is that Americans should get back about their business, but also take some time today to pause, to remember the victims, and to dedicate themselves to what the president calls fighting back in the first war of the 21st century. Many members of the president's cabinet will go to the ceremony at the National Cathedral. The president himself scheduled to go up to New York to take part in a moment of silence there as well, in a prayer service, as well as to try to see some of the research and recovery effort, the recovery efforts up there, rescue and recovery efforts, excuse me, the weather complicating all this, but White House officials saying the president still plans to leave in just a little bit.
And understandable, John, why the president would want to go up to New York City, if for nothing else, to show the support for the rescue workers and for the people who are still living there. And yet I have to imagine in this environment, to move the president at this time has got to be a security nightmare for the Secret Service.
A security nightmare for the Secret Service, certainly very much added security precautions. We have seen that even in the recent decision to keep the president and the vice president at a safe distance from each other, so they're not in the same location just in case there is another strike. At the same time, first and foremost, the White House says in the president's mind, before he agreed to take this trip at the request of Governor Pataki and Mayor Giuliani, was to make sure that the security presence required for the president would not interfere with the recovery efforts, the damage control efforts, any last-minute rescue efforts up on the ground in New York. Once assured by the mayor that New York City very much wanted to see the president decided to go on up this afternoon, but he will keep his stops limited so that his own security bubble does not affect the recovery efforts underway in New York.
And on that note, as far as we know, Vice President Cheney remaining at Camp David this morning?
That is correct. As far as we know, the vice president has stayed up at Camp David this morning. Again, he was moved from the White House yesterday based on some security concerns. The Secret Service calling those routine, but another senior official I spoke to later in the day said, look, you're going to have to get used to this. We view this as a national security crisis. There are going to be precautions taken that you might find extraordinary, but this is going to be the way it is for at least the foreseeable future. John
King, we'll let you get out of the rain there for a moment at the White House. Thank you so much for that information. Leon.
Actually, rain almost befitting a day of national mourning, as if tears falling from the sky. Let's go up down to Paula, standing by in New York. Paula, I'm not sure if you've been told yet or not, but we're keeping our eye right now on a scene in Washington. In the Capitol, we expect Senators Lott and Daschle to be coming out any minute now and expressing more of that bipartisan support we've been hearing coming from Congress. And we'll be going to that coverage of that in just a moment. You see there the live picture we've got set up just down in that hallway. Paula, up to you.
All right, thanks, Leon. And while you were on the air breaking all this news on the investigative front, we have learned that the president has approved the calling up of as many as 50,000 military reservists. That is new information to share with you. And right now, We want to dip back into that news conference that Mayor Giuliani and Governor Pataki were holding right now, New York's police chief at the podium. Just to quickly bring you up to date on what the mayor has said so far, is that 10,400 tons of debris have been removed. He made it quite clear the weather is certainly hampering cleanup efforts. He also gave a warning about telemarketing firms that are calling Americans all over the country, but mostly here in New York, for donations. And he warned everyone that if you get one of those calls, you should call the FBI or you should call the police. And in the mayor's words, if we catch you, we're going to put you in jail. He also made it quite clear, if they can find any of the folks who are responsible for calling in some of those 60 false bomb alarms yesterday, bomb alerts, bomb threats, they will be arrested as well. Now, the governor actually shared with us a 1-800 number, which is indeed a legitimate number for Americans across the country who want to make any sort of donations to surviving family members or those that are injured. I'm going to quickly share that number with you now. We may even have a graphic to support this. If not, grab a pen and a piece of paper. That number is 1-800-801-8092. Once again, that number 1-800-801-8092. Once again, a very firm warning from the mayor of the city that if you get a telemarketing call, and apparently these telemarketers are specifically targeting the elderly in this country, call the FBI, call the police. What they are doing, the mayor says, is illegal. And the mayor says if he can catch them, he will put them in jail. Now, on the real estate front in New York, the mayor is confirming that at least 20% of Lower Manhattan office space has either been destroyed or damaged. The other thing the mayor cautioning us all against is being very careful with the details of our reporting. If you've stayed with us throughout the morning, you know that information is very fluid. It changes all the time, and it is very difficult to get accurate information out of ground zero. But the mayor and we all are trying to heed this advice. Do not want to raise the hopes of anyone out there, and unfortunately, everybody's being given conflicting information. This is very hard on the families that have to endure this process. And joining me right now is William McCarthy, who is one of the many men in this country deeply affected by this tragedy. Welcome.
Thank you, Paul.
Your brother Michael is missing.
Yeah, my brother Michael, he worked for a company called Car Futures on the 91st floor of Tower 1, and when the first plane hit, actually, there was a live feed with his office in London as well, and so initially we kind of thought that perhaps the office wouldn't have survived because it was the first hit impact was on the 80th floor or so, but turns out, and you know, just learning from different people, that the office survived the crash, but the people in England have told us that there's a loudspeaker that came on saying, please, you know, stay where you are, remain calm, and some people actually went to the top of the building hoping that there would be an evacuation there. And right now, unfortunately, there's been no good news whatsoever. The company, though, Car Futures, have been wonderful. Yesterday and today, actually, for those people out there actually that are related to someone in with the company, actually, at the Waldorf Astoria in the Conrad Suite, they're having a, from 8 o'clock this morning till 10 o'clock tonight, they're having a session where people can come in and talk. They have a stress counselor there as well as the CEO, just trying to let everyone know that whatever information they get, they're going to relay to the families as soon as possible. Unfortunately, though, that the reality of the situation is of the 71 people in the office, when the attack hit, no one's been heard from. So, do you have any hope your brother is alive? Honestly and truly, at this point, actually, my initial hope was perhaps, you know, it was fast and it was painless, and the more I hear about this, I really actually just hope that there can be some sort of resolution to the situation. Yesterday, like thousands of people throughout New York, I went to my brother's dentist to gather medical records and to bring it down to the Armory, and what I was really most impressed with is the fact that for the first time in my life, you know, New Yorkers were giving away things for free.
Yeah, that's a rare concept here,
yeah,
isn't it?
there's water, food, people just walking by saying, oh, you're okay. And it was it's kind of like the old-fashioned American values that we really supported and we have advocated for so many years, almost like Midwestern Ohio. people nice, and the edge was off.
William, unfortunately, I've got to interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
We'll come back to our conversation. The senior senator from New York is now holding an informal news conference. Let's listen.
To us. You know, the trauma is enormous. Even for those of us not affected or affected because of friends or whatever, are having trouble sleeping. But the very fact that the Senate, Democrats, Republicans, stepped up to the plate and gave us the initial amount of money that we need is great. I want to thank the President. When I asked him to help us, he didn't bat an eye. He said, I will help you. I said, we need $20 billion in addition to the supplemental. He said, I'm for it. And that was a tremendous, tremendous boost for us. And Governor Pataki was on the phones late last night making sure this get done. Mayor Giuliani was just great. This was a bipartisan effort that stretched from one end of the country to the other, and it's going to help New York recover a lot more quickly, both financially and psychologically. I'm waiting for Hillary. Did you get Hillary? Okay.
Why were they able to pass both these out today more quickly than anticipated?
We were able to pass them out because people understood the emergency, and even though people might have had differences with language here and there, everyone pulled together. Both resolutions indicated that. Senator Byrd did an incredible job. Senator Daschle did an incredible job, and Speaker Hastert.
Charles Schumer talking about the Senate passing an emergency appropriations bill 96-0, but what is being debated now in the Senate is a use of force bill. As soon as there's any resolution on that, we'll get back to you. But Senator Schumer basically saying the president says, I will help you, and didn't even bat an eye when the senator said we need $20 billion more than the additional, what is in the original supplemental bill.
Any other questions?
Did the president actually constitutionally need this authority, and if not, is this more of a symbolic move today to pass this authorization of use force?
On the use of force, I would defer to. I think that it shows that we're united. It makes it clear legally that he can do it. Again, there was compromise in all sorts of different ways than one never thought, and it shows America's united. If we stay resolute and we united, we will win the war on terrorism. If we don't, we fail. And today's message on both resolutions is unity.
Senator, how long can this unity and bipartisanship last when Congress eventually turns to other issues?
Let's hope it lasts for an extremely long time.
Senator, how confident are you in the markets actually beginning to trade Monday without interruption?
I've been speaking to people in the markets. I think they will trade Monday. I think the Federal Reserve and all of the banking authorities are prepared to go to bat. The companies are looking at their stocks and have reserves on hand. So I think that the markets will open and will open well.
Senator, with both these resolutions, were you at all concerned that they gave the president too broad power and maybe decisions on military force and spending money?
I thought the initial resolution was too broad. I thought the way it was honed down by Senators Biden and Levin and Kerry made me feel much more comfortable because it does involve the War Powers Act.
Are you talking specifically about the decision to take out the language on preemptive strikes?
I think the language on future engagements bothered us very much. I'm now being joined by my colleague, Senator Clinton. We worked as a team on this. We worked day in, day out. We've hardly slept. I was filibustering so you could get here. And it's just a great victory for New York, as I mentioned, and let me turn it over to my partner and New York's, and half of the team for New York, Senator Clinton.
And it's a tired but very happy team right now. We are very grateful, first to the people of New York, and particularly to the governor and the mayor for giving us the first-hand view and briefing about what the dimensions of this devastation were and the human cost and financial cost that rescue and recovery and rebuilding will entail. I also want particularly to thank our leadership in both houses, on both sides of the aisle, who really came through in recognizing the urgent necessity of beginning to put the dollars out there that will make clear we are going to fund whatever it takes to recover. And I particularly want to thank the President and the staff of the White House, the OMB, who understood our request when Chuck and I were in the Oval Office yesterday and asked the President for an additional $20 billion. He immediately agreed. And it meant a great deal to us and to the people of New York. So we're very grateful today.
Thank you.
This has been an historic day in what has been obviously quite an historic week. Once again, the Senate has pulled together, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans, responding to a crisis in a way that Americans expect. I am very appreciative of the magnitude of our responsibility and very gratified with the response the Senate has again shown this morning. The Senate has passed an extraordinary response to the disaster, providing the President with ability now to move forward in healing this nation, providing him with the resources to do so and with the moral support that is evidenced in a unanimous vote. The President has also made it clear worldwide that it is our intention to seek out and to punish those responsible for their acts. We have now passed a resolution that will accommodate his desire to do so and keep ever so cognizant our responsibilities under the Constitution as equal partners as we pursue these goals. I applaud the President's actions, and on behalf of the Democratic caucus, support his efforts to do all that he can to achieve that important goal. So the Senate has spoken, and again, as has been the case all week long, we have said that we stand shoulder to shoulder, literally and figuratively, in our effort to do the right thing. My partner in this effort, standing as we have, shoulder to shoulder, is on my right, and I must say, we could not have accomplished all that we have without his remarkable leadership, and I thank him publicly once again for his efforts this week.
Thank you, Senator Daschle, for your comments and for your leadership. I believe this is another historic day in the Senate. The Senate has acted in an aggressive and an appropriate way to pass this legislation quickly that would support the President, to give him the funding authority that he needs and the funds that he needs for humanitarian efforts, for cleanup, for disaster assistance, so much that's going to have to be done in the aftermath of what we have seen this past week in New York City and in Virginia and in Pennsylvania. We also are taking specific action to provide the President the authority he needs, as Senator Daschle said, to punish those that are responsible for these acts. We could quibble for days or for weeks. We could argue the legalisms. We could parse over every word. But the Senate, united like I have never seen it before, chose not to do that. The American people expect us to act. They expect us to be a team as an American country to deal with this problem. And we are doing that. The President is providing the right leadership. We are doing our part in that partnership. And I believe we're going to see results from these actions. So I'm pleased to be here with Senator Daschle to announce these results. I thank Senator Daschle, the Democratic Conference, and the Republican Conference for the way they have acted today. It's very impressive.
Can you tell us how the investigation is going and whether the United States is getting any closer to pinpointing what they need to do and how they need to do it?
I certainly am not in a position to give you an authoritative review of the investigation. I am confident, given the briefings we've been provided throughout the week, that the investigation has been at least partially successful in the very short time under which it's been underway. I do believe that just over the last 24 hours with the incident in New York, we've seen how responsive and how quick to act our authorities can be and will be, but I can't give you any definitive appreciation of where the investigation is.
Let me just say that obviously a lot of work is underway in our transportation system with FBI, I'm sure with the Central Intelligence Agency, all appropriate government agencies there. It's underway. I think we need to understand that this is a situation that may not allow us to take action in a matter of hours. Hopefully we can get some early determinations of who and was involved and how this came about and be able to take actions. But this is an action, a war, if you will, that will probably take time. We cannot just take out a single plane. We must sink the carrier of the enemy, this time a terrorist enemy that is worldwide and more difficult to identify and to take action against than anything else we've done before. So while we're determined, we want as quick as action as possible. We must be aware that this is going to be a tough fight.
Did you set the
portion of the ultimate cost of this disaster that $40 billion represents? Do you view it as simply a, quote, down payment or something?
I think it's too early to tell what the magnitude is. Nobody has an assessment. We know that it exceeds any devastation we've experienced to date throughout history. I believe that most of us...
At a time when Majority Leader Daschle and Minority Leader Lott are engaging in a rare show of unity, you're beginning to see many of the folks who are beginning to line up outside a wet National Cathedral in Washington, where a prayer vigil will be held starting about an hour from now. We will be covering that live. The President will be in attendance. In addition to the President, his father, the former President, will also be there, as well as President Carter and President Ford and many, many members of Congress. The two Senators Daschle and Lott praising their colleagues for passing a $40 billion appropriations bill. Senator Clinton and Senator Schumer saying they give President Bush a great deal of credit for agreeing to an additional $20 billion, which makes up that $40 billion amount. And I have just been told the Senate has just passed someone, you have to tell me, a use of force resolution now on the floor of the Senate. So there is a lot going on. That vote, too, by a 96 to 98 to 0 margin. Lots to tell you about on the New York front. The mayor of New York saying that in spite of the nasty weather, the cleanup and recovery efforts continue. Some 10,400 tons of debris having been removed. Other sources confirming that at least 20% of lower Manhattan office space damaged or destroyed. Everyone in the city being very honest about what the rescue workers are up against here. This rain has not helped. It's made an incredibly dangerous situation for the rescue workers in there. It's made it harder for them to get into the area. We heard one story, which I think we can confirm now, that some of the rescuers had to dig through 20 feet of rubble just to find the top of a fire engine today. There is still hope that they might be able to find people alive. The mayor confirming yesterday that one of the firefighters rescued was originally believed to have been buried in the rubble the first day. That is not the case. He, in fact, was injured yesterday in the middle of his rescue efforts. The mayor saying all schools are open today with the exceptions of the schools that are south of 14th Street. The Senator Schumer confirming he fully expects the markets to be open, the major markets, on Monday. Got a lot of political officials talking to us today. The mayor telling us earlier on that they plan to open up a southern artery, for those of you who know New York geography, to get down to Wall Street. And he's encouraging businesses to send people over the weekend to try to clean up some of the adjoining buildings so people can actually go back to work on Monday. It's very difficult to get to that part of the city because the main artery going south is just clogged as a staging area for these rescue efforts. To put a human face on all this, I'm going to rejoin William McCarthy, whose brother Michael is missing. He was on the 91st floor of the first tower hit.
Correct, where the first plane hit.
And you have gone to his company. For those of you who didn't hear the first part of this interview, you're not too hopeful at this moment that he survived.
Well, at this point, actually, I'm with my mother and my father and the wonderful people in my neighborhood, actually, that have been calling, and they've been stopping by and offering just words of encouragement or just feelings of sympathy. And I think actually that, I mean, last night we were kind of sitting around the table all talking about Mike and just sharing, like, you know, our feelings about him. And he truly was a Renaissance man. I mean, he was extremely intelligent. He was 6'3", 220 pounds. He played Division I football. He was gregarious in his love of life, and he worked hard. He played hard. And there's thousands of stories to be shared, but one of the things that I loved about Mike most is that his name was Michael Desmond McCarthy, and he had almost, we kind of joked around and said he was two different people. Michael was the type